Hey guys, welcome to the Think Sports podcast. Today we have an exciting episode. We have two guests, Shinjoy, who's an avid Formula One fan, and we have Shreyas, who is also an avid Formula One fan. He has his own podcast where he talks about multiple sports. It's the Tete-a-Tete podcast. We'll have all the information will be in our description. So today we're gonna do a Formula One preview. We're going to talk about the Eifel Grand Prix, and we're going to talk about Lewis Hamilton's feat and like the next generation of drivers. So I'm going to hand it over to Arjun, and you can take it from there.
Thanks, Rick. So excited to have you guys. Just wanted to know your views on starting off from yesterday's Grand Prix. It was interesting. They didn't have any free practice because it was all rained out. And that did play a role towards the end because they didn't know how long they would go and tire settings and engine problems setting in. And Valtteri Bottas again took pole, gave us hope. Maybe there's a possibility. Maybe he could win. Disrupt the apple cart. But unfortunately, he had issues and had to retire, as did a couple of other people. Lewis Hamilton, his 91st Grand Prix victory, phenomenal achievement in my opinion. Max Verstappen was second, and the much-loved Daniel Ricciardo is back on the podium. I think after 2 years, 2.5 years. I think it was on podium last
Baku,
in
2018.
Monaco.
Monaco.
Monaco 20.
Okay. Yeah, so it was, a wonderful achievement for him. I really rate him as a driver, so it's good to see him back on the podium. But I'll throw this out to Shinjoy first, what he thought of the race in general and his views on the Grand Prix.
So the race in general was comparatively uneventful, like compared to some other races that we've had, like Monza and Mugello. Bottas might have had a power unit issue, but he'd already been overtaken by Hamilton after he made a mistake, which is like so Valtteri Bottas. Yeah, so Lewis Hamilton wins again, but I guess Daniel Ricciardo getting third is probably the highlight, and also Nico Hulkenberg going from P20 to P8 in basically his second day in the car, having not practiced at all, was a phenomenal achievement, I feel. So yeah, I guess, and like Red Bull as usual, Max Verstappen's been brilliant. So points for Romain Grosjean and Antonio Giovinazzi for Haas and Alfa Romeo as well, which is like a rarity for them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's a very interesting point. Nico Hulkenberg just stepped in on Saturday, I think Sunday morning, and he had to send him to Lance Stroll's car, which is
he went straight to qualifying. Like there was no practice.
There's no practice, and to finish 8th, it's remarkable in my opinion how this man doesn't have a drive at this stage, because we all know he's been in and around Formula One. There was this ridiculous stat, I think, thanks to Drive to Survive, that he is the only one who doesn't have a podium yet. Right? He hasn't got a Formula One podium in his career, which is remarkable.
Like he has the record for most starts without a podium.
Yeah, so that's
he's
ridiculous.
He's also an extremely highly rated driver. I think it's just like in his head now, where
it's 100% mental. I think, speaking of the podium, yesterday was quite open because Bottas retired, and then that third was up for grabs, and Lando was running in third for the longest time when Ricciardo pit, and then of course his engine blew, or he had a sensor issue, so he left race. But Perez, Ricciardo, Lando were in for the hunt for the podium, and I think that's the difference, right? Because Ricciardo takes the podium, he has the opportunity, gets the podium. Perez has had opportunities in the past, he gets the podium. Lando's done it, Sainz has done it. So that's, I guess the difference is that it's mental for Hulkenberg, like Rick said. So it's quite difficult to get over that.
To be fair, towards the end, like his car couldn't. I don't think his car particularly could compete for a podium. But in terms, also, I think Lando was only in the podium conversation just like before he hadn't pitted, right? So that's why he was running in third, because he hadn't pitted at all.
Yeah, but he had very good pace though. He was on old softs. So he had very good pace, so he probably would have.
With the safety car, after the safety car especially. Oh shit, safety car happened only because Lando stopped.
No, there was a virtual.
But he had good pace, and Ricciardo had
When Ricciardo pit, yeah, he could. Yeah, Ricciardo pit.
But Ricciardo had much older tires, so Perez and Norris could have closed up. Yes.
But Ricciardo was quite unfortunate with the virtual safety car because they just pulled in the virtual safety car when he had gone into the pit lane. And Hamilton and Verstappen had just pulled out, so it was quite unfortunate. But yeah, touching on, I think we can all agree that we have a fairly good idea who the top three will be in the Drivers' Championship. I mean, I'm not going to go into the order, but I think the midfield battle is the most interesting because I think Racing Point are in it. You've got Renault who have come up. McLaren have been looking really good. I don't want to put Ferrari in, but Charles Leclerc can always surprise people. I think Sebastian Vettel is just waiting to move to Aston Martin. I think he's given up. He does not care about Ferrari at all. So I'll ask Shreyas what he thinks about the midfield battle, which teams impressed him the most, and who he thinks will be the best of the rest.
I think this year it's been a classic tale that I don't think I've ever seen a top three battle really on track, because we know it's going to be Bottas, Hamilton, and Verstappen if they finish the race. So it's always about who can finish fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh, and it's always such a tight battle because all the drivers within that fourth to eighth position are, they're not just like fast drivers. They're very good at pulling off moves and, in their words, licking the stamp and sending it. So it's quite fun to see some of the action down there. And with respect to like the three teams that are now in third, fourth, and fifth, there's Racing Point who are third, McLaren I think are fourth, and Renault fifth. Ferrari are kind of like out of the picture a bit because although Leclerc might perform week in, week out, Vettel is just, like you said, his mind is already at Aston Martin, so he's not going to really do anything. But between those three, it's going to be circuit specific and a battle of who can make the least mistakes. And I think you have to look at Ricciardo's performance in the last 4 or 5 races. He's performed fourth, fifth, almost every race, and he's finally got his third place now. Incredible run. He's now up to fourth in the Drivers' Championship, so that's another big achievement for him after last year's disappointment. So looking ahead though, because there are 2 races that are relatively unknown with Imola and Portugal, I don't know. It's going to be so fascinating to see who gets on top of every weekend on Fridays or Saturdays. Because Imola is, again, just like Nürburgring, it's going to be a 2-day weekend. So it's again down to the teams and the drivers to figure out the best way to go ahead for the weekend. And it's going to be tight. It's going to be maybe a couple or 3 points between those 3 teams at the end.
Yeah, Rick?
It's exactly like Shreyas said, right? Like the driver that impressed me the most is Danny Ricciardo, which is where I'd have to say that Danny Ricciardo looks like he's on track to finish best of the rest. But exactly as he was saying, the unpredictability of these new tracks will play a part. I mean, it does look like Charles Leclerc is finishing pretty high up, considering his car seems to be not great by where Vettel finishes most races. Even if it is tailored to him, it's still Vettel finishes outside the points when Charles Leclerc's finishing fourth, fifth. So I think the midfield battle is tight, with McLaren looking fast in a couple of races this season. Renault now getting their podium. AlphaTauri with Pierre Gasly looking really fast. And looking actually faster than Alex Albon for most races, Pierre Gasly.
He finished 6th yesterday, which is crazy. Yeah. They were nowhere near. He finished, I think, started like 12th. He was 15th by the first lap, and he still finished 6th.
Pierre Gasly's race pace looks fantastic. So I think that would be a really interesting watch to see. I think that's the only place where it's competitive right now. So that'll be super interesting to see who comes out on top.
Yeah, Shinjay?
Yeah, so Ferrari for me are out of the race. They have no chance. They're actually in a battle with AlphaTauri for 6th and 7th, constructors wise. I think they are 13 points ahead of AlphaTauri, and AlphaTauri have started like making deep inroads into that lead. As for Racing Point, Renault and McLaren, I feel it's going to be close, and I feel it's going to come down to the drivers at the end, because I don't think the teams in terms of performance have that much of a difference. Drivers going into the season, I thought Renault had the strongest driver lineup with Ricciardo and Ocon, but Ocon has disappointed this season massively for me. So I think unless Ocon improves his performance over the last 6 races. McLaren, I think, are the favorites with Norris and Sainz doing really well now. Sainz started the season slowly, but eventually has made up ground over the last 4 or 5 races. And Racing Point, I feel Perez and Stroll especially is like a liability. I think their car was better at the start of the season. Right now, the performance levels are more or less same with McLaren and Renault. And I feel the driver lineups of McLaren and Renault will win out. If Ocon can perform, Renault can get third. Otherwise, I feel it's McLaren who's going to get third.
To be
Do
fair,
you guys think that the potential? I mean, obviously Ricardo's moving to McLaren and who else? Sainz moving to Ferrari, of course. Do you think that's going to play a part, like last couple of races or something? Do you think that will be a hindrance for McLaren and Ferrari?
I don't feel so. I think they'll be professional enough to.
Why do you think it'd be a hindrance though?
Like, get the job done.
I mean, think about it from Ricardo's point of view. I mean, he's directly in competition with the team he's going to, right? And you never know, because although Renault have their, obviously because of Ocon not performing week in, week out, all the bets are placed on Ricciardo landing that 4th place or 3rd place in the constructors. Maybe comes to the last race and he has to fight a McLaren, let's say, for 3rd place in a race. I don't think he'd lick it and send it, like he'd send it on anyone else. It'd just be, one bit of reservation about sending a move like that.
I don't know, man. I think like whenever I watch him drive, it looks like he is hyper competitive, right? Like all of them are. They have to be at that level. So I think he'd do it. I think he'd go for it. I don't see it particularly affecting his performance. As for Sainz, I feel like he'd want to just get as high up the table as he can with McLaren, because it doesn't look too good for him at the moment. So you just try to finish as high as possible. But yeah, I don't particularly think it'd be too much of a hindrance.
Yeah, it's fascinating that we mentioned these two names in particular. A lot of people are asking the question. I mean, normally when you're going from, say, McLaren or Renault to Ferrari, it's a step up. But there was a very interesting poll that Sky Sports put out, which was who is actually getting a better drive? Is it Danny Rick going to McLaren, or is it Carlos Sainz going to Ferrari? I'm interested to know what you guys think about, at least for the next year. I don't know, after 2022 with the rule changes, it's going to be a completely different ball game. It's hard to predict now. But for 2021 at least, who's got the better drive? Is it Ricciardo to McLaren, or is it Sainz at Ferrari?
I think it has to be Ricciardo to McLaren, right? Because they have Mercedes engines, for sure. Because Ferrari still can't upgrade their engine till 2024, I think, under the current regulations, to a level that will actually be similar to what they were like a year ago. So I think for Ricciardo, it's a good short-term option with Mercedes in the back of the McLaren. But having said that, Renault have performed to a level that even he didn't expect them to. So he might feel bittersweet about it if Alonso stands on the podium next year.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good point. I also feel McLaren will be more competitive than Ferrari next year. Might be wrong, but based on the evidence now. Another interesting takeaway from yesterday's Grand Prix was, as Shinjai mentioned, Romain Grosjean getting points for the Haas. Gunther Steiner has been quite public about he wants to change his driver lineup. He has been changing it for a while. Personally, I find the fact that Romain Grosjean still has a drive ridiculous, because I just feel he's an absolute track hazard. So if putting you guys on the spot, who do you think could be a fresh or new driver lineup for Haas to make them competitive for the midfield battle again? I mean, I know the car is a huge factor, but I mean, just to put an upgrade in terms of their driver capabilities. Shinjay?
So I think Haas can go in a few directions over here. So if they want to opt for an experienced driver lineup, they could remove both Magnussen and Grosjean, and they could get Sergio Perez and Nico Hülkenberg in. That's a fantastic driver pairing. Although I think maybe Perez and Hülkenberg might be having issues with each other. I'm not so sure. They've had issues with each other in the past. But if they can get them working, those are two brilliant drivers. If you want to go for a younger option, the Haas have very close ties with Ferrari. And Ferrari have 3 really good junior drivers coming up: Mick Schumacher, Callum Ilott, and Robert Schwartzman, who can definitely get a drive at Haas, and they're targeting one of the seats in Alfa Romeo and one of the seats in Haas definitely. So that's definitely open for consideration. If we want to replace both drivers, they might want to stick with continuity. They might want to keep one driver in as well, even though they've not really performed up to standard. But I feel the best option would be to go with one senior driver. So you either go with Hülkenberg or Perez, and then one of the Ferrari juniors. So you either pick Callum Millett or Robert Schwartzman, because I think Mick Schumacher is favourite to go to Alfa Romeo. So either Callum Millett or Robert Schwartzman might get to Haas.
My question is, why would you want to keep one of your drivers if you're Haas? Because it doesn't look like either are competent, right? Like, at least going by
because these people are this season, every season, Gunther, you could have replaced the drivers at any stage of any season in the last 3 seasons. But the thing is, Gunther Steiner seems to be a fan of continuity, so he might still want to retain one of the drivers. He might. I'm not saying, I don't feel it's ideal, but Gunther Steiner might feel that for the continuity of the team, heading into 2022 with new regulations, completely disrupting the team with a new dynamic might be harmful.
I think Gunther, he said that, I think this week, so Callum Millett was supposed to take FP1 and that got washed out obviously because of the rain. And after that, Gunther Steiner came out and said that, I think there were 3 contradictory quotes where he said first that Callum Millett was on the short list. Then he said he's not on the short list. Then he said we're not looking at young drivers. So it's kind of fascinating as to what is coming from Gene Haas, because at the end of the day, Haas is like the most brittle team amongst all the 10. You know, they've regularly threatened to leave the sport because they don't find it financially sustainable. So for them, I guess it's all about the short term. And for the short term, like Sanjoy mentioned there, they need experience. And I mean, Hülkenberg and Perez is a dream lineup for any midfield team. They showed that at Force India, brought them to 4th in the championship. So instead of taking a punt on one of the youngsters, they should just go for the 2 most experienced midfield contenders out there in the market.
I was gonna say exactly what Shinjay said, where I said more than Perez, I say Hülkenberg. If you have Hülkenberg available, why? And you're going to replace, you have to replace either Kevin Magnussen or Romain Grosjean. It looks like Romain Grosjean is leaving. It makes the most sense to bring Hülkenberg in. It looks like he's been.
But Perez brings a lot of money into. That's important for Haas.
Yeah, he does bring a lot. Also, he has been, even though Shinjoy mentioned that Lance Stroll and Sergio Perez haven't been great, Sergio Perez has actually been driving pretty well for the last couple of races. He's finished quite high up in the podium.
Sergio Perez is a very good driver, but I'm saying compared to the number 1 drivers that the other teams have, Sergio Perez might not be as good. For Haas, obviously, Sergio Perez is a massive upgrade to the current drivers.
Yeah, because he has been driving extremely well, and he does have great tire management. Like historically, has had great tire management.
Yeah.
I think there's some stat that says that he's the best midfield driver in the last 6 years or something, because in every season that he's raced with Force India or now Racing Point, of course, he's been ahead of his teammate, and I think he's been within 7th, 8th or 9th in the Drivers' Championship every year, something like that. I think even last year when they had an underperforming car, he was 8th or 9th in the championship. So that says a lot about how he gets the best out of a situation where his car's not really, it shouldn't be really there. So it's quite impressive.
So we agree that Haas should replace both their drivers, right?
Yeah, of course.
That's what I got.
That is definitely agreed.
Is that Haas needs to change both their drivers.
What about Kimi though? What do you guys think about Kimi?
Not only if they want to be successful, but also for the sake of the other drivers on track.
Safety.
I think Haas should change their lineup. But yeah, coming back to, we have to pay tribute to Lewis Hamilton. This is his 91st victory in his career, which is a phenomenal achievement. He is now equal with my all-time favorite, Michael Schumacher. So I think I'd be correct by saying he is going to make it 7 World Championships, and he's going to equal Michael is there as well. So automatically when he's posting numbers like this, the conversation starts about, is he the greatest driver of all time? And where does he rank among the great legends? I mean, you got Fangio, Prost, Schumacher himself, Niki Lauda. You got a lot of people, Ayrton Senna. You got drivers, Fernando Alonso, also part of the conversation. Sebastian Vettel, four-time world champion. So I'm interested. I'm going to throw this to Shinjoy first because I know
Strong opinions about this.
he rates Lewis Hamilton. Of course, he does, but he doesn't believe he should be part of this conversation. So, over to you, Shinjai. Where for you does Lewis Hamilton rate in the conversation for being the greatest driver of all time?
Okay, so first of all, it is a great achievement that he's won 91 races. He'll probably go past 100, that is for sure. He's on track to win his 7th. He will most probably win his 8th next season. So it's some phenomenal numbers. But the problem with Formula One is it's the one sport where you should not be judging the skills of the drivers based solely on statistics, right? Because the car itself has a lot to do with it. And Mercedes have been the absolute dominant force since 2014, except for maybe 2017 and 2018, where Ferrari were close and Vettel maybe had an opportunity. But otherwise, Mercedes have been completely dominant, and he's not really had too much of a competition since Valtteri Bottas has come in. When Nico Rosberg was there, it was still close. Nico Rosberg actually even nicked a championship off of him, which I feel none of Schumacher's teammates have ever beaten him. So none of Senna's teammates have beaten him. Alan Prost has beaten him, but he's a 4-time world champion as well. So it's a pretty high level of competition. But Lewis Hamilton, definitely for Mercedes, numbers-wise, will go down in the history books as one of the top 10 drivers for sure. But I feel you can't judge him just based on his Mercedes stint. To judge Lewis Hamilton as a driver, you have to look at his McLaren stint as well, where, of course, he had a brilliant rookie season. Everybody knows about that season. But though there were mitigating circumstances in that season, which let's not go into that now. And in the 2000, he won the 2008 World Championship against Felipe Massa for sure. But in those 2 years, also McLaren did have close to the best car. Like they were the joint best car with Ferrari. Between 2010 to 2012, McLaren had the second best car on the grid after Red Bull. And Lewis Hamilton did not finish above 4th in the championship in any of those 3 seasons. Whereas Fernando Alonso in the 3rd best car in 2010 and about the 4th or the 5th best car in 2012 finished 2nd in 2 of the seasons. So I feel Fernando Alonso, if you're rating Lewis Hamilton as one of the greatest, Fernando Alonso is definitely, as far as I've seen, already should be in the competition. And as far as Michael Schumacher is concerned, I don't think we can even speak their names in the same breath. I really don't, because Michael Schumacher won 2 championships with Benetton in a time when Williams at that point were absolutely dominant, and in that season also they were pretty dominant. They were half a second faster every race, and Michael Schumacher, by a sheer dint of performance, won the championship. So I don't think Michael Schumacher and Ayrton Senna are definitely a level above. Because Ayrton Senna I haven't watched. It's mostly based on hearsay. He's legendary. There's a very popular story where he was 1.2 seconds faster in a qualifying lap than Alan Prost in the Monaco Grand Prix in the same car.
Yeah.
So at McLaren Honda. So I feel Ayrton Senna and Michael Schumacher are definitely a level above. In the next year, definitely Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Alan Prost, Juan Manuel Fangio, definitely as well. I think all these drivers come in the next year. And I feel Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Räikkönen are probably after that. So yeah, I feel he's not the greatest of all time. You cannot mention his name in the same breath as Michael Schumacher or Ayrton Senna.
Yeah, I agree. I actually want to extend his point further because, like you said, in Formula One, it's not just about the driver. The numbers, you can't stack the numbers against another driver and be like, Schumacher and Hamilton have the same number of wins, so they're equally good or equally talented. Because I think it's important to mention that Hamilton, within those 2009 to 2013, that period, he was beaten by Button twice, I think, in the championship. And he made so many mistakes that you would never associate with someone like Schumacher or Senna or someone in that level of greatness. So I mean, Hamilton, he's benefited from having the best car on the grid by a country mile. Since 2014, that car's been at least half a second quicker than anyone else, other than 17 and 18, of course. And he's had an incompetent teammate, let's face it, for the last 4 years. I mean, Bottas, he comes out with a new version every season. He wins in Australia or the first race, and he goes back into hiding. So he's had it easy, and I mean, easy is quite, it's quite lazy to say that he's had it easy, but in relative context, it's not been as challenging as it has for a Schumacher or a Prost or a Senna.
That is still high praise, right? When that is the comparison, right? Like even
but he's not undisputed. People are saying he's the undisputed best, so that's not fair. I don't see it that way.
He is a very good driver. He is one of the best drivers of all time, but he's not the greatest ever.
No, I'll concede that, where I'm like, okay, fine. I'll concede to him not being better than Michael Schumacher and Alan Prost, and things like that. I had a problem with Shinjai and I have been speaking about this for a while, right? And Shinjai is of the opinion, and I'll ask again whether he's still of the same opinion, that Lewis Hamilton is the fourth best driver on the grid, right? And
on the
current grid.
On the current grid. Okay, so I think Shinjai, you had said, what was it? Max Verstappen?
Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, and Daniel
Ricciardo. Right? And then Lewis.
Yeah, are better drivers than Lewis Hamilton. But the thing is that I'm not saying this based on their entire career. Right? Career, obviously, Lewis Hamilton has had better. I'm saying right now, as like fast drivers, like obviously Max Verstappen, there's a possibility Max Verstappen might never end up with a championship, so he'll not be in the same league as Hamilton. But on the basis of this season or the last season, let's not go into it because Ricciardo wasn't that great last season. But on the basis of this season or the last, like you can say 3 seasons, I really think Max Verstappen is first. He's like head and shoulders above not head and shoulders. I think Charles Leclerc is a close second because of what he did with Sauber in 2018. He pulled out some massive results, which he's doing with Ferrari also right now. It's there for everyone to see. Yeah. And I feel Daniel Ricciardo is a really underrated driver right now. I know he's a darling of the media, but I don't think he's rated as a really fast top-level driver, which I think he is, because he goes in 2014, first season at Red Bull, he goes in and he destroys the defending 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel. It's his first season at Red Bull. And Daniel Ricciardo, I think apart from one bad season in 2015, and maybe you can consider the last season also bad, but I think Renault had a really bad car as well. But apart from that one bad season in 2015, Daniel Ricciardo has been absolutely top level for me. And I think that's not proven enough because he's never had a car to win the races.
I mean, he had at Red Bull.
So I still stand by it. I
think at Red Bull, it was fascinating that Max and Daniel were so close to each other. Like every race, they always fought the same piece of track.
Yeah. So Max, I definitely rate Max Verstappen higher. I'm definitely rating Verstappen higher than Ricciardo, but I feel Ricciardo is also there. Like, see, it's sometimes you have to like judge on how someone is overperforming the car, right? So I don't think Lewis Hamilton has overperformed a single car in his life. So he's definitely fourth.
How do you overperform a car, or how do you overperform a car that is out and out the best? Right, is my question.
I think it's teammate specific, right? Because you look at Bottas. Bottas is probably a notch below the top 6 or 7. Yeah, he's not in the same level as the top 6, 7 drivers. We're talking about Hamilton being the top level. We're not saying he's undisputedly the first at the moment of the grid. So then now you look at the teammates. And now Jenson Button beat Hamilton 2 seasons in 11 and 13, I think. And then Rosberg, of course, beat him in 2016. And once Bottas came in, we knew that Hamilton would get the better of him. But then you look at the others around in the grid. Ricciardo and Verstappen are almost evenly matched. And like Shinjoy said, I think Verstappen is better than Ricciardo. You look at Leclerc, he's outperformed his teammates last 3 seasons now. So you have to say that he's one of them who gets the best out of the car and kind of overperforms the car. But then at the same time, you look at Hamilton, I don't think he overperforms the car. I think he performs to the level of the car. Exactly. But you don't see him beating his teammate by like a second. I mean, Bottas is not a bad driver, but he's not the best. So he's not a very good reference point.
I
So
mean,
as a comparison, would everyone agree that about Bottas and Albon are about at the same level?
Probably, but Albon has years on his side.
no,
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, no. What I'm trying to say over here is that Bottas is consistently, if you look at this season, he's been slower than Hamilton. He's been about a tenth, 2/10 slower than Lewis Hamilton. Whereas Alex Albon has consistently been 7, 8, 9 tenths slower than Max Verstappen.
but then
There's the
also,
difference for you.
but it does. But while you're making that argument, it is fair to say that while Mercedes prefer Lewis, clearly they don't race them 1 and 2 like Red Bull does. Red Bull clearly races Max and Alex as one.
But it's forced, isn't it? Forced on Red Bull's hand because Albon is just like a second off.
Yeah.
He's not even fourth on the grid when they have a qualifying session.
Yeah, but when they come out and like clearly declare that they basically do R&D on Alex Albon's car and allow all the optimal settings to be on Max Verstappen's car, like everything that any testing that has to be done is Alex Albon's car. He comes into the grid
but I
with
think
almost a new car every season.
So, no, that preference is given to Mercedes also. In Mercedes also, it works this way that whoever is first
Leading
in the championship after a certain point of races, they get preference on the R&D.
Also, in terms of Bottas and Albon's comparison, Bottas at Williams did a lot. I mean, I guess Alex Albon didn't have that much time at AlphaTauri or Toro Rosso. Then, but Bottas overperformed at the time his Williams car.
Not really. He was up against
Alex Albon get beaten
Massa.
by Danny Kvyat just before.
No, but wait. Firstly, going back to Bottas and Massa. Massa was at the end of his career and he was getting battered by Alonso at the time. So he moved on to Williams. And I mean, Bottas and Massa were evenly for 3 years. Did Jim out? Fighting for podiums.
In 2014, they were better than Ferrari. Yeah, they were fighting for podiums. They were better than Ferrari in 2014. They were the third best car.
yeah, okay. So this is obviously a conversation which can go on and on for hours. It's fascinating. But what I'll try and play devil's advocate for a bit here, especially. I mean, I agree with what the boys are saying in general, and for me, Michael Schumacher is my favorite. So he is greatest of all time for me because I've watched him. I don't know the others. I haven't watched the others who are part of the list. Like Shinjai said, it's mostly hearsay. Coming back to what really gets to me is considering Lewis as the fourth best in the current grid. That's something that's quite difficult for me to digest because yes, whilst he doesn't overperform his car, there is a different kind of pressure associated with someone who is always expected to win and he keeps on winning, right? And you have to pay tribute to that as well. Yes, he has the fastest car. Yes, he has an unbelievable car. By that logic, Valtteri Bottas should be second because his car is so far superior than all the others. So driver capability does make a huge difference. Valtteri in such a good car is still not performing at that level.
Yeah, but I'm not rating him above Valtteri.
No. I'm not saying that you're rating him above Hamilton in any regard, but I'm saying we also have to give respect to Hamilton dealing with the pressure of always being the favorite, always winning and winning all the time. At least in a season like this year, he's going to win again. There have been some decisions which some bans, some fines that the FIA have been giving him, which have been a bit harsh. I mean, it hasn't happened in previous seasons. So he's had to deal with some adversity also. We're now looking into the future. And the question that presents itself is, after Lewis Hamilton, and I guess we can dub them as the next generation drivers, right? Who do we believe will be world champion first, right? I think we can put Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, George Russell. I don't really rate Lance Stroll a lot, but maybe you want to put him in there. Carlos Sainz, Esteban Ocon, maybe Pierre Gasly shout for this thing. I wouldn't put Daniel Ricciardo as next gen, but he hasn't been a world champion, so if he becomes a world champion, sure. So I'm going to throw this to Shreyas first. Who he believes in the future would be his top pick to be world champion first among the next gen.
So I think I see a way in which Hamilton wins an eighth title next year and retires from the sport. So potentially 2022 could be the first year that we'll get a non-Hamilton winner. And I genuinely don't feel Red Bull will ever win a championship. It seems like Verstappen Red Bull is just not going to be a dream that they sort of to achieve. So I'm going to look at McLaren Mercedes as the first title winning car after Mercedes. And I'm going to say Daniel Ricciardo is going to win the first championship after Hamilton. But then I think McLaren are going to be so good that Lando Norris will win the year after that.
Oh, okay. That's a bold shout in that regard. How much I mean, we all know now that Honda is leaving Formula One. So that would be a blow for Red Bull because they might have to revert back to a Renault engine, and I think they had not the best of terms when they left the last time with regards to Renault. So you do not believe that Max Verstappen or Red Bull. Do you see Max Verstappen moving on somewhere else, or do you see him staying at Red Bull?
I think he could move to Mercedes, couldn't he? And I think if Mercedes gets or Hamilton leaves Mercedes, I think it would spell the end for Bottas. I'd never see Mercedes backing Bottas for a title. So I think it could be George Russell and maybe Max or Ocon, depending on what happens. But then again, Mercedes have dominated for like 7 years, and probably next year will be 8 in a row. And you're going to see Toto Wolff leave the team. You're going to see a lot of the senior figures leave the team. I'm sure they can't keep going at the same rate they have for another 5-6 years. So there's going to be change, and when there's change, there's automatically a dip or a transition period that teams face. Red Bull had it as well. So I think Mercedes are just going to lose that elite level of dominance, and hence I'm looking at McLaren as the leading contender.
But are you saying that Lando Norris? You said Lando Norris wins after Danny Rick, right?
Yeah.
Are you saying next season? Like, does Lando Norris win immediately after Danny Rick? Does he
immediately after Ricciardo? I think Lando Norris, just because of his attitude towards the sport, where he doesn't take it lightly, but he just comes off as a guy who's a joker. Ricciardo, you could say that, he's shown it for 6-7 years, so you kind of see that he might be a championship contender. But I honestly think Lando Norris he's just so, again, underrated. I don't know why it comes across like he's underrated, but then he probably gets the best out of the car in the qualifying sessions. He's beaten Sainz, I think, over the last couple of years. And that's not an easy feat. And at the same time, last year was his rookie year. And I just genuinely see him. I'd love to see him, first of all, win the championship. But if McLaren do have the best car, I think he'll win after Ricciardo.
Right, Shinjoy?
So the thing is, it doesn't really depend on the driver. The prediction mostly depends on the car, who gets it right in 2022 after the regulation changes. But based on current form, I would obviously go with Max Verstappen if he gets a competitive car. But agreeing with Shreyas, I think McLaren are in the best position to take advantage of the 2022 rule change, and they probably will be the best car or close to the best car along with Mercedes if Mercedes are there. So I think yeah, Daniel Ricciardo being the most experienced driver, I think in a championship, experience also counts. And I know Ricciardo's never actually been in a championship fight, but I really feel that Ricciardo's experience will count out over the young Turks. But again, it all depends on the car, and it's very difficult to say who's going to get it right in 2022 because nobody foresaw Mercedes becoming this dominant when the rules changed in 2014. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure who's going to win. Like if Mercedes continue dominating, anybody who's in that car might win the championship. Won't be Bottas. Whoever, either Hamilton if he continues, or whoever comes in to replace Hamilton will win. But yeah, if you're basing it just on current form, then it's Max Verstappen if he has a competitive car.
No, I mean, given the nature of the sport, I think we all understand that who gets it right in terms of car development and settings, it's going to be huge. So if you were to remove that element, Shinjoy, I'm going to ask you this, in terms of who you think, just based off driver capability, driver capability and personal favoritism also, I'll give you that. Right? Who would you want to see be among the next gen, be world champion?
See, I potentially foresee Max Verstappen versus Charles Leclerc for the next 5 or 6 years, from 2022 to about 2027. That's potentially what I foresee if they both have competitive cars. If Ferrari can get it right with Leclerc, or if Leclerc leaves Ferrari for a competitive car. So I feel it. I personally want Verstappen to be the first winner after Hamilton, because I feel with his performances, he's deserved to be like the heir to Lewis Hamilton.
I have to agree, right? If it's
Be
based
Max
on
versus
driver,
Charles for the next few.
if it's based on driver capabilities, it has to be Max, right? Next, like it looks like he's so much faster than everyone else. And if we are to believe the Red Bull is as bad as Albon makes it look, then what Max does is just absolutely ridiculous, right? The fact that he's so far ahead of whoever's coming, if he's third, whoever's coming fourth. And they create such a massive lead, and makes sense that the Mercedes do it. They're so much better than, like, they're so much faster than everyone else. But the fact that he keeps up and then has just like a 40-second lead to the person who's right after him, right? Like fourth or third, as the case may be. I think it has to be Max. Personally, I really want to see George Russell in a competitive car. I've spoken to everyone about this. I really like what he's about. He's also proven that he's better than a lot of the drivers that he came up with in Formula 2. He won Formula 2. He's dominated in Formula 2 and before that in karting, everything. He looks like a very well put together driver. Toto Wolff seems to back him, right? To be
but Rick, don't you think that he might need a year to kind of bed into
kind
Mercedes?
of settle in,
He hasn't
because he's been so uncomfortable.
He hasn't got a point.
Correct.
At this point in time in his
I
career,
definitely think that he needs time to settle into actually being competitive, because he has been so not competitive for so long. I think it'll be hard to immediately like just get into like a Mercedes, start winning races. You know what I mean? I feel like that'll definitely take some time. But from everything I've heard about him and like how well he performs in quali and things like that, I do see him being a great driver, and I do want him to kind of shine through, get a competitive car, see him race. I want to see him go up against the Lando Norrises that you said would kind of win, the Charles Leclercs, the Max Verstappens, and see how he fares with the big boys with the competitive car. Arjun, you haven't
Yeah,
gone.
no, that's good. Mine is pretty clear. I'm an out and out Max Verstappen fan. I want Max Verstappen to become world champion. I mean, I backed him to become world champion this year. I backed him to be world champion next year. I really rate Max Verstappen a lot. Another person I really rate, not so much about driver capability. I wouldn't say he's up there, but it's no secret to people who know me. I like Esteban Ocon a lot. More so because of his story. I follow Esteban Ocon quite a bit. I like his driving style. I remember the bust up, which was between Esteban Ocon and Max Verstappen, which eventually resulted in Max not really liking Esteban. So I think he's competitive. I like his hunger, his drive. Right, he was the third driver for Mercedes. A lot of things about, say, George Russell, people like Esteban Ocon, they're drivers part of Toto Wolff's portfolio. But as Shreyas mentions, there is a very realistic possibility that Toto might leave the sport completely. Right? So I wonder what happens then to people who are kept, what direction Mercedes goes in. So banking on those things, I mean, even George Russell, I think, is with Toto Wolff. I'm not particularly sure if he is, right? And he's a shoe-in to be the next Mercedes driver. But I don't know if the Mercedes change direction, what happens to him. At least it's a lot more exciting. I don't know if you guys have seen, there's a lot of media chatter about Formula One not being as entertaining as it was before, because it's so one-sided. There's that wonderful video. I don't know who was it. Was it Jackie Clark? I don't know who was it who says he's so bored about watching Hamilton continuously race and come first, and it's getting boring. It's killing the sport that he loves with all the FI rules and regulations and so on. So I just in general, for someone who's followed the sport for 13 years now, I just like it to be competitive again. I'm quite sad that we haven't had a single wet Grand Prix because there are so many friends of ours who've just got into Formula One because of Drive to Survive, right? And Drive to Survive tells you a wonderful story. It gives you the drama, but it doesn't really tell you the intricacies and difficulties of Formula One and how competitive it used to be 8-10 years ago and the difference as it is now, right? I mean, unfortunately, this season we don't have a Monaco Grand Prix, so they don't understand how difficult a track that is. So just as a fan, I'd love to see, scenarios like 2007, 2008, three people going into the last Grand Prix, each one can become world champion. You become world champion in the last corner. That's what made the love for this sport grow for me. So I hope the top bosses get it right. The 2022 regulations come into effect and make the sport a bit more competitive, because as we've all mentioned on this podcast, that car makes a huge difference. It could be a great equalizer, and we want to see those battles. We want to see Charles versus Max. We want to see George versus Lando, a proper grid battle. Yeah.
So another big criticism, other than it just not being as competitive as it used to be, is how aggressive they are with these penalties. And I think Jeremy Clarkson talks about this, where he's like, no one can overtake anymore. There's a difference between dangerous driving and actually diving in
like
for
aggressive
aggressive overtake. And he was just like, it made it interesting. I know there are safety concerns and things like that, but there are
no, but then you see elite level drivers in wheel-to-wheel combat. You see Max, you see Leclerc, and even Sainz and Lando for the matter. You see them racing each other, and they race hard, but they race with that one car's width at all times. Even yesterday, there was a point where, was it Max or was it Charles who was being overtaken by Ricciardo? Yeah, Ricciardo got him over the outside, and Charles left him exactly one car's width. And that is hard racing. Charles could have got him back, even though he was behind him at the next corner. But again, that is the level you expect him to go to.
But you say that, but like the race right before this, Charles Leclerc took out Lance Stroll in the same move. Right? Lance Stroll overtook him and he just took him out. So
I think you look at the F2 races, it's a very important marker, because you look at the F2 moves. Some of them are like, banzai moves, dives into turn one or whatever, the braking zones. And they're very dangerous because the closing speed of these cars is so high that if you're stuck behind another car and you're braking, a meter later than the other car in front, you could just spiral over him, and it's a I don't know, aeroplane crash kind of situation. So I guess from that point of view, you have to respect the rules. But yeah, I mean, some of the penalties that have been given are silly, for bumping people off track and stuff, which we want to see. We want to see them, literally battling wheel to wheel and not just, gliding past with the help of DRS and whatnot. But I guess there are some drivers that show that overtaking is possible, and it is beautiful to overtake with some of the moves that they produce.
I think it was it? So guys, to wrap up, thanks for joining us, both of you, Shreyas and Shinjoy. It was great to have you on. To reiterate, go follow our podcast on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, and all of that, and on YouTube. Go follow us on our social media. Once again, I want to remind everyone, Shreyas has a podcast of his own. It's the Tete podcast. The link will be in the description. Go check that out. Hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.